r/askreddit. Truckers of Reddit. What spooky things did you witness on the road? TLDR stop to help a motorist with a possible flat, may have prevented a murder. I service fire equipment, so I drive a box truck, and cover parts of PA, New York, OMD, and WB. I was in rural NWPA, returning from a service call and heading towards the interstate to go home. On the way to this customer, I saw a small pickup truck on the interstate whose right rear tire was steadily deflating. A mile or so before my exit, they pulled off to the side. I didn't stop to see if they needed help, and felt a little bad about it. As I drove down this dark, twisty road, I passed a Dodge Durango pulled over into a barn driveway. There was a person lying on the ground behind it, struggling with something. It looked like the guy was trying to change a tire or get the spare out from under the Durango. Remembering the pickup from earlier, I decided to turn around and see if he needed help. I pulled into the first driveway I saw, about 1/4 mile down the road, turned around, and headed back. Halfway back, the Durango passed me, going the direction I had originally been headed. I got back to where I had seen the Durango, planning to turn around again, but as I swung into the driveway, my headlights caught a figure lying motionless in the snow. I stopped and jumped out just as the figure sat up. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, in a thin, torn black skirt and top. Her hair was mussed, her eye was starting to swell, she had red marks on her throat, and her lip was bleeding. I helped her up, got her into my truck, and cranked up the heat. I had taken my jacket off, so I gave it to her, and she covered her torso and arms. She didn't want to say anything. Her throat was sore, and she was badly frightened. I called 911, and they dispatched a police car. I gave her a bottle of water, and she whispered, "Thank you," then sat with her head bowed and eyes closed. It took about 15 minutes for the police car to get there, and she stayed silent. As the car pulled in, she said, mostly to herself, "He's gonna arrest me." The trooper walked up and motioned me to exit, asked her if she needed an ambulance, she declined, then asked me what had happened. I explained what I had seen. He wrote everything down, then talked to her for a few minutes. He helped her out of the truck and into his car. She quietly thanked me for coming back, because she thought that guy meant to kill her. As far as I know, she wasn't arrested. She was pretty beat up, and the trooper spoke and handled her as if she were the victim of an assault. It was almost certainly a transaction, sex or drugs, that had gone badly. I never found out what had happened. I watched the news outlets for that area for a while, but never found anything. Myself and another truck were traveling Highway 1 between Medicine Hat and Brooksab on our way home from Saskatchewan, and it's really dark there since you're 100 km away from any town lights. And then all of a sudden the whole sky lit up as green as grass and a huge fireball streaked over us. We all immediately pulled over and asked each other, WTF was that? Heard on the news the next day it was a meteor the size of office desk that landed somewhere between Lloydminster and Cold Lake. We had never seen anything like it. I saw a young girl being beaten in the back of a car, badly, closed fists to the face repeatedly, clear as day even though it was night. My lights lit up their car. Followed them hitting the horn, got number plate and rang police, but they got away. Police called me the next day to say they had investigated and was told the girl was having a medical emergency and was fine. This is gonna get long. Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was delivering and installing machines for the company I was working for. I was in a 26-box truck with 12 machines in the back. I was having trouble with the truck the day before, had it checked out by the rental company and they said it was all good. Since I was behind schedule due to the truck and problems with installations, I decided to drive late to my next destination. It was about 11 o'clock at night on a state route through the Upper Peninsula. There were no street lights, there was no other cars. The headlights from my truck were the only thing illuminating the road. I was already creeped out. At the peak of feeling like I was in the middle of nowhere, because I was in fact in the middle of nowhere, every single light on the dashboard of the truck lit up, and then it stalled. Now it's pitch black, I am stopped and the truck isn't restarting. Rather than eat up the battery trying to turn it over, I shut everything down and started making phone calls. As I was calling everyone and anyone that would listen, I sat in the dark night, with the only light being from my hazard lights. I looked up and saw something move in front of the truck, just out of distance of the flashing lights. At first I thought it was my imagination. I finally got a hold of someone and they told me it would be 2 to 3 hours before they could get a mechanic to me. So now I am sitting in silence, the only noise is the clicking the hazard lights are making, and I am staring out the windshield into a void of darkness, when I see movement again. Just as I was about to shit my pants, my phone rang and that nearly secured the pants shitting, because it scared the hell out of me. It was a mechanic that wanted me to get out, open the hood, and check some things out. No, I am not getting out of the truck with an explanation as to why. He was irritated with me, but I didn't care. So finally, after seeing the movement just out of range of the lights one more time, I threw on the headlights with the high beams. The headlights caught 3 wolves snacking on something that looked like roadkill. I honked the horn and they looked at me like they were irritated more than scared. I was safe, the wolves more than likely weren't going to bother me, but it was spooky just knowing they were there. So I shut the lights off. I would turn the lights on occasionally to check to see if they were still there. I was basically just sitting there listening to the hazard flashers click, while surfing my phone. Each time I turned the lights on, the wolves were still there. Just to remind you, I am in the middle of nowhere, no homes, no business, nothing but trees, wilderness, and wolves. I suddenly heard what I can only equate to a woman's scream of terror that sounded like it came from right behind the truck. Then something slammed into the side of the truck, hard enough to rock it. I wasn't afraid of the truck tipping over, but whatever hit it hard enough to rock the suspension enough to move me around in the cab. It was a pretty heavy truck. I turned every light that truck had on. Slipped it into reverse so the reverse lights came on and laid on the horn. I was checking both mirrors, and the only thing I saw was a shadow bolt across the road. I couldn't make out what it technically was, but in my head it was werewolf yeti Bigfoot lizard monster that was going to end my life, and it was going to be agonizingly painful the entire time. I also noticed the wolves were gone. From every nature documentary I've watched, the only time predators leave food is when there are bigger/badder predators around. By this time I was in full Bobby Hill that's my purse, I don't know you, mode. Whatever crossed the road, didn't cross very far off the road. I could hear it thrashing around in the brush, breaking sticks and what sounded to be logs. There was no noise pollution, I only had my window cracked a little bit and I could hear pretty well. I basically had the steering wheel gripped, all the lights on, and was feverishly looking out the windows, and through the mirrors to make sure nothing was around the immediate area of the truck. I couldn't see off the road, and the flashlights I had were in the back of the truck in my tool bag. I'd have to get out of the truck to get to them. Finally I saw some headlights through one of my mirrors. It seemed like it took hours for them to close the distance to me. The noise stopped as the headlights approached. It was obviously the mechanic because no one else was stupid enough to be out there besides me. The mechanic pulled out in front of me, my headlights were shining on him and his truck. As his door opened to step out, we both hear the woman screaming in terror yell again and the brush thrashing intensified. Whatever it was still close and pissed. His door immediately closed and my phone rang. He called my phone asking me what it was, he sounded more panicked than me. I had no clue what it was, and he had no clue what it was. So the mechanic called the police. He wouldn't work on my truck until we could secure the area, which I don't blame him. He didn't like my idea of him getting out of his truck, just to check things out. 2 Michigan State police officers showed up. They lit that area up like it was a stadium. I finally stepped out of the truck for the first time since it all started. We heard that scream 3 more times while the mechanic was working on my truck. Thankfully they were getting further away. The cops had no clue what it was either, they were kind of spooked too. The mechanic finally got my truck running, and I made it to my hotel for the night. The next morning I walked the truck for inspection, and the side that was hit, there was an indentation about the size of a basketball. Whatever hit it, didn't hit it hard enough to push all the way through, but it definitely mushed the fiberglass. The indentation was about 7 off the ground. I have no idea what it was. I probably never will. I do confidently know that I will never ever drive through the Upper Peninsula at night again. That's the spookiest, the scariest is another long story. My wife's grandfather hauled fruit and potatoes across the Northwest and Central Plains. From what he would talk about, I swear he was a serial killer. He had found or been questioned about a half dozen deaths at rest stops. Most, if not all, were determined suicide. He also talked about all the rich women that drove SUVs and how frequently he would see them masturbating at red lights. Guy was a real character. A fresh solo traffic accident. The car was flipped upside down on its roof. The driver's head was halfway out to the neck, through the shattered front window. He did not have a seatbelt on. I used to travel for work doing construction. My boss was driving and I was passenger. We're on our way back home from Tennessee to Illinois. Just leaving the mountains but still pretty much the middle of nowhere, and we notice a couple dead deer on the road. These things are like exploded. My boss and I say something about that sucks, a semi must have been hauling and clipped a herd. We get to the top of a hill and there are so many more dead exploded deer. Possibly hundreds. Definitely dozens. They didn't look like they got hit by a semi. They looked like they had sticks of dynamite put into them and lit off. Semi-trucks had definitely been driving through because we didn't have to dodge any of them. And we were driving our big work truck and trailer, so if we had to crush a couple it was no big deal. It went on for more than half a mile. Maybe up to a mile and a half. My boss had been on the road a lot more years than I had. I asked him what the hell was that. And he seemed just as lost as me. Said I have no fucking idea and I'm not stopping to find out. That shit didn't make any sense. Had a family member who was a trucker for a fireworks company in the 80s. They regularly had to make deliveries from the East Coast to Los Angeles. Shipping these things to California meant many drives through the open desert of the American Southwest. They have claimed to see tons of weird stuff out there, from glowing orbs, unexplained lights, and weird animals in the dark. The desert has a way of messing with the human mind, but one night a bunch of floating orbs on the horizon turned out to be legit. They saw a bunch of orange orbs crossing the highway a mile or so ahead. It turns out that a bunch of tumbleweeds had caught fire in a forest fire several miles away and were flying across the highway ahead. They had to drive down this open desert highway at night while being on the lookout for flaming tumbleweeds. Not really something you want to maneuver around when you are carrying fireworks in your trailer. I don't have any stories as I'm not a truck driver, but my dad was. This thread is making me miss him like crazy. I should have asked him for stories like this. I bet he had a few. Smiley face, edited to fix spelling. Not a trucker, but I had a college teammate from Miami tell a story that he swears on to this day. He and his girlfriend were making the drive to Naples late night, on a 2-lane road through the Everglades, and had been in a line of cars behind an 18-wheeler for multiple miles. She fell asleep and he was surfing for something to listen to on the radio. Only one station came in clearly enough to be tolerable, so he gave it a listen. The DJ came on and said something along the lines of "The stars are extra bright in the Everglades tonight. If you're driving through there, pull off and take a look." He said he normally wouldn't even think of it, but for some reason felt compelled to that night. He woke up his girlfriend. She was annoyed and didn't want to, but he convinced her it would be worth it. They stopped and just took in the stars for 5 to 10 minutes. He said it was the most amazing sky he's ever seen. They get back on the road and drive another few minutes and come across a massive accident. The truck they were following had jackknifed and took out a handful of vehicles that were following. He said there were multiple fatalities, but I've never been able to find a news story about it to confirm. Probably would have been in 2005-ish. They most likely would have been involved if not for that random DJ on the only radio station to come in that night. Grew up in a trucker/mechanic family, and was going to join the family business. At 16, I was on the road with dad every summer, because you have to learn sometime, and this is how my dad taught me. Snowstorm. Kansas. Do you know where they can't drive in the snow, during a storm? Kansas. White knuckle tight as I pass wrecks and cars and other tractor trailers who have jackknifed. I begged dad to take over, but there was nowhere to pull over, so I had to muscle through. Looking out the driver's side window, I noticed a family in a caravan going backwards. I locked eyes with the father, who locked eyes with me and just gave me a bewildered, sad little smile before veering off hard to the left in a puff of white powder and disappearing from view. I'm sure they were fine, but I can still see his face to this very day. My mom is a trucker. This is her story. She was driving through Arizona when she saw what she thought was leaves blowing across the road in the distance. This puzzled her since there's mostly pine trees in northern Arizona. When she finally got to the leaves, she realized that they were migrating tarantulas, 1,000s of them. There were so many of them that her truck was sliding on their guts, so she had to slow down. She stopped at the first truck stop and told her co-driver to fuel up. He was sleeping at the time, because she wasn't going to step foot outside after what she just saw. Her co-driver was pissed since it was technically his time off, and he thought she was crazy, until he saw the tarantula guts and legs caked in the inside wheel well of the truck. She also outran a tornado in the Midwest. She was about to pull over and take cover until she saw another big rig that was parked on the side of the road get tossed a couple hundred yards like a toy. She called me and told me that she thought she was going to die and wanted her last words to be "I love you" to me. She pulled off the freeway and got to a Walmart, where she ran into the basement where all the staff and customers were taking shelter. After the tornado passed, they stepped out of the basement and into daylight, since the Walmart was destroyed. She has many stories like this. Trucking is 90% boredom, 10% insane shit like this. Edit. Thanks for the Reddit gold. A logging truck accident in Texas. It totaled 3 semis altogether and multiple logs went through the backside of a cab and likely smashed the driver in front or decapitated them. Minimum of 3 fatalities were on the news for that accident and I felt awful seeing the debris and damage. I'm terrified of log trucks now and I'm otter through many states. It had the Final Destination feel to it. A trucker I know claims he was driving a logging truck down a remote dirt road in the middle of a forest at around midnight when a dog-man creature walked out in the middle of the road. It stared at him for a few seconds, plainly visible and well illuminated by all the auxiliary lights on the truck, then it just took off and disappeared into the woods on the other side of the road. He's not a superstitious man and he rejects everything supernatural as fiction, but he 100% believes that what he saw that night was real. I've only heard him talk about this twice. He was very drunk both times he opened up about it. Just talking about it rattled him. He was clearly uncomfortable thinking back about that night. In 2017 on one of my routes I had stopped at Love's gas station in Emerson, Georgia, maybe 20 minutes outside Atlanta. I had been stopped for about an hour just resting and eating some fast food when a woman came knocking on my door. I opened it and she looked homeless and pretty old, like in her 50s or 60s. I asked her if I could help her and she was like, "I think we can help each other," and I said, "How so?" And she proceeds to proposition me paying her for sex, which I declined and sent her on her way. I continued to rest and eat and play on my phone for another 30 minutes when someone comes to my door and opens it and attempts to rob me in a scream mask. It was obviously the old lady from before. I push her away and lock my door and crank it up. I assumed she ran off somewhere cause I could no longer see her. After the truck was ready I pulled off and started driving. Soon cars next to started trying to get my attention and honking and pointing to the back end of my truck. I pull over and when I come to a stop I see someone jump and start running. It was that same lady. This crazy woman was hanging onto the back of my truck how I was driving. It was just a really odd experience. Was driving in my car with my GF down the Jersey Turnpike at night. Up ahead a large glow. As we got closer we realized it was an 18-wheeler completely engulfed in flames stopped in the right lane. Driver nowhere to be seen. Called it in, to know what happened to the driver. My dad and my older brother were/are truckers. I rode with our dad many times. We were on the freeway when a car tried to pass us and had a blowout. The car fishtailed left and right and finally went off the road into a guardrail. We were at speed, so dad didn't stop, but car parts flew off when he hit the guardrail. I don't know whatever happened, but I did see people stop to help in the rear view mirrors. They were lucky though, they only made contact with the guardrail but no other vehicles. We were carrying 75,000 pounds of mail, so we were lucky not to make contact because it would have been ugly. My dad was a bit shaken after that and he took a few years off from driving and did some other jobs for a while. I know my brother lost a truck, but I don't know the circumstances, so I can't elaborate on that. In December 2021, I was driving over a bridge when I got hit by a semi-truck. My car was totaled. The driver didn't see my small, dark blue car and merged into my lane. Luckily, I was unhurt but the car was damaged beyond economical repair. I posted a link for those who are interested. https://imager.com/a/g0sfeie. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks fuck this and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing/misunderstanding, better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression, except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window, so my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about the same woman/car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, and although he kept an eye on the news, didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? Not mine, but I totally believe it, and have heard it told the same way since I was 6. Around 30 years ago, my dad was driving particularly late, returning home after being away for a while. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., when he saw an old lady walking on the side of the road. My father is a kind man, so he naturally pulled over and asked the lady where she needed to go or if she needed help. The lady just turned to him, and said, "Why did you stop? It is not your turn yet." The lady dismisses my dad, not wanting to make a scene. He leaves her alone, and continues driving. Not even 5 minutes later, down the road he sees a crashed car, with an ambulance already at the site. The following day, the crash was front page on a local newspaper. Apparently the driver died instantly on the crash. He still wonders where that lady was going, since the closest town was still 30 minutes away by car. Again, this isn't my story, and I omitted locations due to this happening in Mexico, so I felt like it just be a bunch or weird names no one outside of my country could place. But, if anyone has any questions, I could ask my dad for more details. Fair warning, he likes to ham things up, so more details on the lady might be shoddy at best. He usually hams up stories too, making them more dramatic the more he tells them, except for this one, so that kinds of makes me think it's true. Not me, but my dad is a trucker. He said one time while he did over-the-road driving several states away at a time / going far from home for potentially weeks at a time, he took a stop on a town near Chicago. He said he watched a prostitute climb into someone's car, then get shot and left on the road as the person in the car drove away. I don't know how true this is, because my dad is quite the country hick that wants to seem cool, but that's what he told me. Long-haul trucking for my firm is done by a dear friend of mine. He awoke surrounded by police in a parking lot a few months ago. 15 feet from his pickup, this dude had been shot and dumped. Not a trucker, but involves a truck. Slow-boated through traffic to eventually pull up on a Miller Lite truck that had tipped on its side near an off-ramp. One lucky ducky hit the hobo jackpot and was scooping pints out of the newly formed Miller Creek with an empty Big Gulp cup. Not a trucker, however. I have driven across the country multiple times. I watched a man run several people off the road in his old Ford pickup. After calling the police and giving them information, he tried to brake check me. When I went around him, he had the most sinister smile and huge black eyes. Maybe it was the sun or my mind playing tricks on me, but I will never forget how dark and empty they were. Still gives me the creeps to this day. When I was traveling through East Texas around midnight in the early parts of 2003, a very bright light lit up the sky enough to not have to use the lights on my vehicle. I left my lights on. The traffic on the highway came to a standstill with people pulling off on the side. As soon as I started to do the same, this star-like light flew right over the top of my vehicle without making any noise. It made some very erratic movements, then disappeared behind some trees. I was traveling to Florida one night on this really old highway in the middle of nowhere. I had just passed an 18-wheeler and out of nowhere this huge object runs out into my lane. The highway had a very steep embankment on either side, so it either ran really fast or was sitting there for some time on the side. I did not even have enough time to react, it happened so fast. We all think it was an alligator, but it looked like it was shape-shifting right before I hit it. I actually have a video of this incident, but wasn't sure if I could post it here. Not my story, but my best buddy freshman year was a trucker. His worst story was when he was going down to Georgia, just a normal trip of diapers and baby wipes. He spent a good long day traveling with a man who was carrying a full load of gasoline. The trip was a week there, and my buddy and this gas tanker guy spent the last 6 hours on the road together, shooting the shit through the radio and whatnot. After nearly a full day of talking, My buddy gets a call from the tanker guy, and my friend says the words ran his blood cold. "Hey buddy, my brakes are out." My buddy gets on the radio, lets the other truckers know. They try to cordon off the passengers behind him while police can make their way ahead of him, clearing the road. My buddy loses line of sight as they shut down the freeway, as there is now a very large bomb with no stopping power barreling down a popular freeway. They get the all clear to go ahead, the situation has resolved, and by the time my buddy gets to the emergency stop section of the freeway, he sees that the entire section is now a 50-foot wide crater. Metal and dirt everywhere. But there was not a single injury or casualty save for the brave tanker guy who dove headfirst towards his death to prevent any others. Back when I was running 48 trash trailers, we had a transfer station in the western side of VA that was deep in the mountains. You could get there by interstate, however it's a pretty tiny town and extremely dark at night. We had a ton of drivers talk about how creepy the place is and I never believed them. Finally I got the run out there after asking, since I love seeing the sunrise over the mountains. I arrived around 4 a.m., whole place is fenced off with a locked gate and massive river flowing right next to it. Basically impossible to get into without a lot of effort, and if you're not afraid of the bear that lives in the tires. I pull around, drop my trailer, pick up a load, and do my walk around / tarp up. Then I heard a noise behind me. Now kind you, this is a somewhat open lot. I'd guess around a half acre or so with some tall grass, the big tire pile, and some old dry van trailers. I turned around with my headlamp and illuminated the grass and saw what looked like someone walk through them. I said to myself, that's kind of fucking strange, and continued with my business. Then I heard more rustling coming from the tree line that backs the river. At this point I said fuck this and hopped in my truck to leave. And as I'm pulling off the spot and go down the little side road, I saw my tail lights illuminate the outline of a person facing me in the middle of the road. Needless to say, after a few more creepy encounters there and then finally catching a look at Yogi the steroid in despair, I quit doing that run and did the less creepy run to another podunk site. After seeing some strange figure wave at me as I locked the gate to the new site, I did the smart thing and changed jobs over to running a gasoline tanker. Edited to break up the wall of text and some grammar buffs. I'm not a trucker, but one day I was driving back from a rave and there were cops' cars everywhere and road flares. This guy hit another man on purpose with his truck. The guy got stuck under the vehicle and he ended up dragging him a few kilometers. Well, there were body parts all over the road. A limb, the head, intestines, yes, so that happened. My dad drives truck. He once saw a man run across the freeway bloodied all over. The next day a detective called him because there was no one found and there was no blood spatter on the ground where he said he saw him, near an overpass bridge. He makes sure to tell everyone that he tells the story that it was 100 miles into his route so he wasn't tired. Not a trucker, but I've been on a lot of road trips all over the US. On this particular trip my best friend and I are driving from Western MD to Western KY on short notice because his brother had died. We set out at about 8 p.m. and by 10 p.m. we're somewhere in the West Virginia Appalachians and we hit total whiteout blizzard conditions. We're sliding all over the damned road, even crawling at 15 miles per hour, but the semis are blowing past doing 60/minimum/ and their wake is also shoving us toward the guardrail with frightening regularity. I wasn't even driving and it was stressful as hell for me. I can't imagine how bad it was for the driver. Fortunately he's one hell of a driver with lots of experience in snow and ice, which is the only reason we made it through intact. By about 7 a.m. the next morning we've come out the far side and we are totally exhausted and in need of gas. We spot a gas station next exit sign up ahead, and as we leave the highway we descend into the fog of the Smoky Mountains. It's not too bad where we are, but occasionally the terrain will fall away on one side of the road or the other and the valley is filled with very dense fog. It's about 50/50. It's beautiful and creepy early in the morning with the sun barely above the horizon and absolutely no one around. To make matters worse, this town we come into on the service road can't have more than 50 people in it. It's barely more than a post office, a couple stores, and a handful of houses. And 2 gas stations, so we get our pick, abandoned for at least 10 years, or abandoned for at least 40 years. After seeing the state of the gas stations we looked around and it was pretty clear that the whole town was abandoned, which makes me wonder why there's still a sign on the highway pointing to a gas station here. Oh well, gas or no gas we need a break, so we park up in the 10-year lot and get out. We're there for maybe 20 minutes, grab a light breakfast and some refills from the cooler, and the fog is rolling in fast enough that it's getting noticeably harder to see, so we get back in the car. As we're pulling out we notice some scraggly looking guy in beat up overalls, no shirt OFC, stand up from behind a short retaining wall looking startled. My buddy rolls down the window to ask him where we can find a gas station, but before he can get 2 words out dude starts screaming bloody murder at the top of his lungs and runs off into the fog. As he's running I notice he's carrying a rifle or shotgun of some variety, and the latter is confirmed as he starts shooting it off apparently at random while screaming like an absolute wild man. I hear at least 4 shots followed by more / different screaming. There's at least 3 people now that I can hear as we are hauling ass out of town as fast as that little Geo could take us. While the screaming faded pretty quickly, the shots echoed through the valley all the way back to the highway. To this day I have no idea what the fuck that was about, but it thoroughly creeped me out. Today's lesson: don't hang around tiny little towns in the Smoky Mountains, kids, those rednecks are batshit. Driving into Prescott, Arizona, late at night, an ambulance passes me. I don't slow down, we're the only vehicles on the road. It's desolate, they weren't gonna turn off anywhere. I wasn't in the way. As it's passing, the inside of the ambulance is well lit. I can barely see the patient. But I can clearly see the EMT giving chest compressions. I'm not a trucker, and this may be kind of spooky, mostly gross though. The town I grew up in had a chicken processing plant on the one end of town. So they have the chickens shipped in and butchered and processed for packaging on site. On the other end of town is the rendering plant. So trucks get loaded up with the remains of whatever is not packaged for consumption, innards, blood, bones etc., and sent off across town to the rendering plant for disposal. One night in 2008, a truck left the chicken plant and headed through the main drag of town down to the rendering plant. It was only when the truck arrived that the driver realized a valve on the truck had somehow released, leaving chicken guts, blood, and all manner of other chopped up bits all the way through town on the main street. Edit to add link, https://www.grandforks.herald.com/newsmd/tanker-flood-with-chicken-with-blood. My dad used to drive trucks and he used to tell a story of his scariest time on the road. I'll try to do the story justice, Dad. So he drove trucks while I was about 5 and my brother was 3. He did so entirely to make money to take care of us, which also means that he needed to be able to actually make it home to his kids at the end of the day. He was driving up the side of a mountain that apparently genuinely resembled one ripped right from a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It spiraled up, has these rickety, flimsy metal guardrails that had smart cars been invented, they still would have not prevented even them from vaulting over the thing, let alone a semi. It was insane o'clock and my dad was super tired, but he wanted to push it so he could get home faster. What happened next woke him right the fuck back up, so much so that if I recall correctly, he had to actually take an hour break on the side of the road just to collect whatever was left of his sanity. He was making his way up the mountain when on his radio he hears what he swore was "Flying Frenchman," followed by a whole bunch of hootin' and hollerin'. My dad apparently wasn't confused by the exclamation for long, as mere seconds later, 2 full-sized, seemingly fully loaded semis came barreling down the mountain, on each side of the road. My dad had to make a quick decision, cliff or rock face. There was hardly a shoulder, but it beat almost certainly crashing into the side of the mountain, so he did what he could to avoid them the best that he could and went for the bank. My dad said that he turned the wheel as quickly but carefully as he could toward the extremely narrow embankment on his, did everything he could to avoid skidding, and narrowly avoided the closest fucker. He apparently also narrowly avoided jackknifing the truck, and the scariest part of all, his own semi had tipped during the procedure. All of the wheels on the one side of his truck got air and he was sure he had just tipped the truck down a bloody mountain, also these 2 assholes could have a fucked up game of chicken. So, the scariest thing my dad said he had ever seen while driving, a pair of flying Frenchmen. Edit, typos and other minor corrections. I wanted to get this posted before it got buried. My grandfather-in-law, who recently passed away, said back in the 70s, he saw a man get decapitated by some kind of heavy-duty cable at a truck stop. A highway truck with 2 containers in tow on trailer in high speed, and as it turned, one of the containers fell off the trailer, crushing a mother and her child, crushed flat, blood, organs and brain matter splat everywhere on the road and sidewalk, all of which transpired right in front of me walking home from school. Couldn't get the image out of my head, still extremely terrified of those trucks to date, and make damn sure to put sufficient distance between me and the truck whenever I see one passing by. My father had parked on the side of the highway, small town 2-lane county highway, so he could go into Tim Hortons and grab a coffee. He put reflective pylons behind his truck as dictated by IIRC, the Highway Traffic Act. As he was getting his coffee, he heard tires screeching and then a loud bang. Someone in a convertible had driven almost full speed into the back of the trailer and was decapitated as a result. Apparently, they found the person's head in the back seat. Dad was a trucker, and while not super creepy, sometimes he would have to drive to a pretty remote location, pick up something, and not be allowed to look at it, be tailed by police/military people, drive to another remote location, back in while they unloaded whatever it was, and then he would be off. When I was a kid, my mother was driving at night with my stepdad in the passenger seat and us 3 kids in the back. Apparently, I learned about it later as I was asleep. What happened was my mother and father both saw, flitting across the road from one side to the other, 2 glowing silhouettes of what looked like 2 little girls holding hands. My mother said, "Picture a silhouette, only instead of featureless black this was featureless bright yellow/white, in the perfect shape of 2 little girls holding hands and moving across the road in their headlights." They saw them for so long that my stepdad was able to process the scene and sternly tell my mother not to steer suddenly, just to brake and not to attempt any huge steering movement. The forms reached the side of the road and faded away. Our car slowed but didn't stop, and my parents continued their journey. When they related their encounter to my grandparents, whom we were visiting, they said that 2 young girls had been killed in a traffic accident on that same road. My Uncle Harry told me a story about a banana truck that lost its brakes going down a hill in Scranton, PA. 30,000 pounds of smashed bananas was the result. On this very night, 10 years ago, along this same stretch of road in a dense fog just like this, I saw the worst accident I ever seen. There was this sound, like a garbage truck dropped off the Empire State Building. And when they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted, burning wreck, it looked like this. I've been hauling super loads on the East Coast for about 5 years now. I have my fair share of stories, but some of the scariest shit you see is how other drivers secure their loads. Some of things you witness and hear make you wonder how people still have a job or are not in prison. I used to work at a supposedly haunted hotel. Bullshit, nothing haunted about it. But the forest surrounding it, not that is a different story. I'm not in the USBTW. I now work at a restaurant just down the road from the hotel. Here are a few things I've seen in my car in that forest. 1. My second day on the job at the hotel, I was walking to my car and got in, old dirt parking lot in the middle of the forest a bit away from the hotel cost that was full when I'd started work. It was just after 11 p.m. and I started my car up and flicked my headlights on and I saw a man there. At the fence at the start of one of the trails that lead into the forest, flat cap, white shirt, kinda shirt jacket and dark trousers on. No coat on, which I also found odd because it was a bit nippy out. I thought that the guy was tapping into his phone at first. People get lost all the time, I thought. Then I put my glasses on, need them for driving, and this guy was writing in a notebook. I stared at him for like 10 seconds trying to figure out how he'd been doing that in the dark, then he just faded away into thin air. I hightailed my ass out of there. 2. The part of Europe I live in is not known for fireflies or glow bugs. I was driving through this particular part of the forest at night, around 8 p.m., about 3 weeks ago, and I saw lights, moving. I pulled over to check it out, thinking it was a vigil of some kind. Bad move. The lights were dancing like candles and then started flying closer super fast. A roar of wind ran through the trail and I had that sense of dread. Jumped back in the car and floored it. Nope, nope, nope. 3. A couple of friends of mine live on the opposite side of the same forest. I went to visit them one afternoon/early evening. It ended up being dark by the time I'd left. Decided that I'd take the route back to my village through the forest because it was faster than going all the way back around. Big mistake. I was halfway through when I saw the lights again, ignored them this time, 'cause do that. A beast-like creature ran across the road on all fours, but it was like a human trying to run on all fours, but it was big. I heard a screech like kinda a deer, but it was a bit different in the distance. Honestly, I'm not sure WTF I saw, but I'm not going deep into that forest for a hike anytime soon. FK knows why I took another job there where I finish at night. Luckily it's on the outskirts. 3 minutes and I'm out.